Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the FK BRNO PSD multi-caliber handgun. I gotta admit, when I first heard of FK, it was for the field pistol, which shoots the same proprietary 7.5 round, which we'll get to. But when I saw that pistol, I looked at the retail price and I'm like, nah, I'm out. Depending on where you saw it, it popped up for $6,000 to $7,000, and I'm just not interested in spending that much on a handgun that shoots a very particular proprietary round. When the PSD came around, I was a little bit more interested, but it was still kind of back of mind. And then they contacted me and said, hey, we'd like to send you a handgun, one of our PSD models, which is a polymer frame, of course, all steel slide, optics ready. And they kind of had me at optics ready, and I was already curious about that 7.5 round. So they sent one out with the standard package, which includes magazines and conversion kits that allows this handgun to shoot 4 calibers. You get the proprietary 7.5 round. You also get 10mm, 40 cal, and 9mm. What you're getting in the gun itself, besides, of course, the ability to change barrels at will and shoot multiple calibers, is you're getting a system that is designed to handle what might, and because I've only fired it out of this gun, what might otherwise be somewhat uncomfortable recoil from that 7.5 round, which is a round capable of 2,000 feet per second out of a full-size handgun, weighing it at 95 grains, which is the round that I shot, 95 grains. And we're getting chronos at, in the neighborhood of 2,000 feet per second, which is really incredible for a handgun. Some might even put it in the Magnum range, even though they're not calling it a Magnum. The round is intended for primarily medium game, and for those of you who would be interested, obviously it would probably make a great self-defense round. However, and I gotta say it again, proprietary rounds, so ammunition availability can be a little bit problematic. For those of you who own guns that have proprietary rounds, you know exactly what I'm talking about, especially in days like what's currently going on. This being filmed in late 2021, some of those proprietary rounds are very hard to find. I didn't have any problem getting ammo for this, so there's a shining, I guess, a silver lining there. To shoot 10 mil or 40 cal, it's simply a barrel change. To shoot 9mm, it's a barrel change and a different recoil spring. The recoil system being kind of ingenious, I've got a front counterweight, and I've got the spring system that sits low below the bore axis, which aids in returning the muzzle to the shooter's eye to be able to fire the next round. Now the gun comes optic ready, which is, you know, mainly why it had my interest. And it comes with 2 different iron sight options. However, neither iron sight options will co-witness through my chosen optic, which is an RMR Type 2. The footprint itself is direct into the slide, which I do prefer if I can get it. However, there's really no fences for the optic. So if you look at it sitting there in the shoe, I've got no gate up front, no gate in the back, no fences, no lugs, whatever. So the optic is just kind of there because it has to be a wider footprint to accept different sizes of optics, which I get. However, this is where a plate would have been beneficial, because then the optic would have a little bit more support, even though it does have recoil bosses, for managing the recoil of, I mean, specifically that 7.5 round, but also 10 mil, 40 cal, and then of course 9mm. Being a single action gun, there's not a lot to it. It harkens back to the operating system, and some of you may have already kind of seen a comparison there to some of your more legacy CZ handguns. Polymer frame did have me a little bit concerned, because I'd heard that the round is a little spicy, that 7.5, and of course I've fired 10 mil and quite a lot of 40 cal in my career. For the purpose of the review, I'm going to do 2,000 rounds. Now that 2,000 rounds was spread out over the 7.5 round, but also 10 mil, 40 cal, and 9mm, which I'll talk about specifically. Unfortunately, there is no burn down, mainly because magazines are a little harder to come by for this gun, and they weren't willing to send me 500 rounds worth of magazines to do the burn down. So I was just going to go ahead and do 2,000 rounds before going that burn down. However, I was still going to do the drop test, which is a drop every 500 rounds. First 500 rounds I did through the gun were all 7.5, which started to take its toll in my hands, if I'm being perfectly honest. 500 rounds, I did it over a period of 2 different range trips, and one thing that I definitely noticed from this handgun is when I'm shooting steel, I'll be shooting at steel out at 100, which is a little outside of the envelope of reality for a handgun, but it's very challenging, and it's a body size C-size steel, actually D-size steel really, because it's a full silhouette. And I'm usually expecting bang ting, but this thing is bang ting because it's coming out at rifle velocities, getting into rifle velocities, depending on barrel length, what caliber we're talking about. And it's just, it just arrives violently. It's a very violent round on the steel, very loud, and it behaves a lot like a rifle, which is a little confusing because I'm holding a handgun. So I'm kind of like shooting it the first time, and then I just kind of stare at the gun and I'm like, oh wow, that's nice. As far as the round goes, as far as performance, some people were asking already when I posted it on social media about ballistic testing. I went down the road briefly of doing ballistic testing, and it's just an aggravation to constantly remold ballistic gel, and then you get into the whole debate over what kind of ballistic gel is best, proper calibration, even though I was testing my calibration for the videos I did ballistic gel. So I've just decided to forego ballistic gel testing altogether and leave it to people who kind of make that their thing. So I'll let that be their lane because they're really good at it. They do it all the time. If you want ballistic data on this round, I highly recommend you reach out to those people or see what's already available out there. As far as performance goes, those first 500 rounds were flawless. The single action trigger on this gun is excellent. My only complaint, and this is kind of unique to me and other people like me, is being left-handed. I have no ambi safety, so I'm having to do something I'm actually somewhat versed in doing, is sweep the safety off with almost like a shooter's grip and come back around. Not a big deal. Holster compatibility, some people are a little bit worried about that because they feel like this thing is similar to like the Hudson. I was able to run it in a floodlight. Obviously, duty holster for this was kind of a no-go. There's other features, of course, single action trigger. The trigger is consistently smooth. It doesn't feel like there was any real break-in period to it. A little bit of a wall, clean break, and then an easy return. Other features on the gun, of course, an accessory rail, the optic footprint, which we will get more into. And then it has a flared magwell. It's almost like a carry magwell, and there's an optional pistol brace that you can attach to it that would give you the ability to not shoulder this handgun for greater support. Clearly, this is something that could be easily adopted if this pistol accepts a higher degree of, I guess, popularity, and actually putting a stock on it. Personally, already with that first 500 rounds, I want this round, the 7.5 FK, in some sort of PCC or submachine gun like yesterday. This may be a first for a 2,000 round review process, being that I can break down that 2,000 rounds between 4 calibers through the same gun. My next 500 rounds, I shot nothing but 10 mil. And while I'm not a huge fan of the 10 mil, because generally it's a more of a, well, reduced capacity, heavier recoil, it's a great round, don't get me wrong. Lots of people use it for self-defense and hunting and all those things. It's just never been my kind of thing. Kind of like I don't like 40 cal either. 40 cal mainly because it's a compromise under 10 mil. But anyway, the next 500 rounds were all 10 mil. And I saw similar performance. Accuracy's there, which we'll talk about the caliber conversions if they do cause accuracy changes with the red dot zero, which they do, but that was kind of to be expected. But the gun just runs, and on 10 mil it ran just fine. Getting into that next 500 rounds after that, firing nothing but 40 cal, I was experiencing the same kind of boring reliability. It wasn't until I got to the last 500 rounds and started shooting 9 mil through it that I started having problems. This thing would stovepipe consistently, shooting 115 and 115 NATO. There were some 124, I fired some 124 Magtech through it where it ran reliably, but anytime I'd try to shoot 115 through it, it would occasionally be like, hey, you want to practice your malfunction clearance drills? Here you go, which I do appreciate. I kind of feel like they probably should have just not included the option for a 9mm conversion. I get why they did. 9mm is relatively plentiful, and it is relatively less expensive than some of the other calibers this gun shoots. However, it just seems like it's very difficult for a gun of this size being built to handle these larger calibers to also be able to reliably shoot this 115, even 124 in 9mm. So, and maybe throwing a disclaimer like, hey, if you're going to shoot 9mm, this is what you have to shoot, which isn't something that they did. It's not a big deal because, again, the occasional stovepipe in the grand scheme of things for this gun was aggravating, but also not entirely unexpected. I kind of expected there to be some issues with 9mm, even with the recoil spring that they include specifically for it. And it was only stovepiping. However, like I said, it probably would have been a better idea for FK to just not bother with the 9mm conversion at all. And if you do get one of these, you're probably going to experience some aggravation shooting 9mm unless you shoot some really good 124. And even then, you're still going to get the occasional stovepipe. Whereas on 40 cal, 10mm and their 7.5 FK round, I didn't have any of those issues. Of course, the optic footprint, we've got to drop test that. I chose an RMR because it's one of the few optics I know that can reliably handle consistent drop testing without the optic itself losing its zero. So I chose an RMR Type 2 for the purposes of this review, zeroed it on the 7.5 FK round. Here is a 5-round group I fired after zero confirmation at 25 yards using the 95 grain 7.5 FK. And then we get to the drop test, which occurred every 500 rounds. After that last drop test, everything seemed to be fine. Optic was still tight. Everything looked in tolerances. I fired an additional 5-round group to confirm that the zero was still maintained at 25 yards using that 7.5 FK 95 grain round. I would call that zero maintained. Now, big question. If I change my caliber, do I have to re-zero my gun? Yeah, you do. You can change grain weight and have to re-zero a gun. So I don't know why anyone would expect, and if you just don't know, then you don't know, but why anyone in the knowledge would expect that I could change complete calibers and not have to re-zero a gun. This might not be something you would notice on iron sights, because iron sights are kind of big and dumb and they cover a lot of the target. So there's a lot of play in the MOA world on most front sight posts at 25 yards to where you might get away with shooting 7.5 and then shooting 40 cal or 10 mil or even 9. But just for, and this again, this is just for comparison's sake, I fired 2 groups, but one on 10 mil and one on 9 mil at 25 yards on the gun zeroed for the 7.5 FK and 95 grain. So here's a 10 mil group. And here's a group fired on 9mm. So the shift is consistently to the left and a little bit low. Not a big deal. You could probably dope for it if you really wanted to. You'd be like, okay, I know when I put 10 mil in the gun, I gotta come, you know, 6 clicks and 4 clicks or whatever. Personally, to me, the novelty of caliber conversions wears off very, very quickly when I get aggravated by things just like zeros. I'm much more likely to buy a gun specifically purposed for a particular caliber and just leave it in that caliber. Exceptions notwithstanding, this gun is, well, it has a distinct advantage in being one of the few guns that allows multiple caliber conversions with such an ease and provides a great deal of reliability, with the asterisk being that 9mm and 115 NATO. With 124, it's more reliable, but it's not as reliable as I would like it to be. But throughout the review process, you know, of course, the drop test, the one-hand manipulation testing that I do on optics, just like I would any gun, the footprint is solid. So long term, can you kill more optics because the optic sits in kind of out there in the wasteland of not having fences to help aid in recoil support? Well, because it has recoil bosses, I'm probably not going to kill an RMR Type 2. Probably not going to kill any other high quality optic with recoil, especially if this is not something you're going to shoot. Nobody's probably going to shoot this 7.5 FK with 7.5 FK barrel in it like they'd shoot like a 9mm. However, those people are out there. So can you kill optics because of the way the footprint is designed? Maybe, but I didn't kill one dropping it. So the footprint, as far as durability and return to zero from that purpose, is a huge pass. There is a zero shift changing from caliber to caliber, but there's no magic trick that they could have possibly done to prevent that. So this gun it excels at what it does. I like the gun, even though there's some features about it I don't care for, like the no ambi safety, but that's something that can be fixed. And the accessory rail, the light rail sitting so low in front of the trigger guard is basically a byproduct of the design. I'd prefer it not be there. However, I understand why it is. You need room for that counterweight for the recoil system they're using to handle that proprietary round, that 7.5 FK. I'm more interested, to be perfectly honest, in the round than I am in the gun. I would like to see that round make its way into PCC/SMGs and see if it can really stretch its legs, both figuratively and illustratively and literally, to provide a greater degree of ballistic performance in a similar size package that we get from other PCC calibers, commonly 9mm, 10mm, less to a lesser degree 40 cal, and then 5.7. And I'm sure there's some other calibers that I'm not really thinking about because they're even more proprietary than this one and not easily as accessible. The round is amazing, just from my testing, my shooting. The gun itself is solid. If you were interested in one of these, the PSD is much more economical and I think better feature packed than the field pistol, which originally what they came out that shoots this round. I'd like to see other manufacturers kind of pick up this round and make versions of their own guns that shoot it. However, some of them would probably have to redesign their, redesign quite a bit of the gun in order to do it, which is why maybe it hasn't happened, or just because the round, even though it's not very new, it's been around since the 20-teens, it hasn't got the traction in the United States that maybe it needs in order to flourish and grow and find its way into multiple brands, multiple styles. So if FK is interested in running or creating or partnering with somebody to do a PCC/submachine gun, I'm definitely going to be getting one of those. As far as this pistol goes, it doesn't really fill a need that I have. I don't hunt with a handgun. Although this would be the one to choose if you were going to do it, just for multiple reasons. So to me, it almost serves as a curiosity and something that I would bring out to let people try that had heard about it and seen it and were curious about it, but it's not necessarily going to be something I'm going to carry. And to be perfectly honest, I'm probably not going to shoot it that much, but when I do shoot it, I'm going to have a great time. And I'm not going to convert it to 9mm ever again. So if you're curious about this gun, you're wondering, hey, is it worth it? If you're looking for those options, you're looking for a proprietary round that gives you rifle muzzle velocity and a 95 grain weight. If you're looking for a gun that has really good quality build and is able to convert caliber to 10mm, 40 cal, and if you want to punish yourself 9mm, this is definitely the gun for you. I'm Eric with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.